Hello and good afternoon, or perhaps good morning to you all. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Pablo, and I'm with the Meraki team. And today we are very, very fortunate to have a special guest with us, and that's Reading School District, and specifically CR Hiestand, who's been kind enough to take a little bit of time out of his busy schedule to share with all of us about his experience with Meraki at Reading School District. We do have some fantastic content to walk through, including a pretty cool demo to show you. So let's go ahead and take a look at the agenda and see what's ahead for the next hour or so. We'll give you a brief introduction and bit of background about Cisco Meraki for those of you who are a little bit less familiar with the solution. But really, most of the time we'll spend talking with CR and going over the case study at Reading School District. And as I mentioned, we will include a live demo so we can actually show you some of the things that we discuss right here during the webinar. And then at the very end, we'll wrap it up with a quick look at the Meraki product lineup, and we will leave a little bit of time for Q&A. But what would be great is if all of you have any questions, if you would go ahead and enter them into the questions panel in GoToWebinar. Also with us today is my colleague Tanya, and she and I will be looking at the questions as they come in. And if you do engage throughout the presentation, we can use that feedback to help steer the conversation. If you have specific questions about Reading School District or for CR, you can definitely let us know in there, and that would be great, and it would keep it engaging for all of us on the line. So let's go ahead and just give you a brief background about Cisco Meraki. Now, Meraki is a completely cloud-managed networking solution, and that includes Wi-Fi, switching, security, and MDM. And all of the solution is designed from the ground up for cloud management. That means that the hardware, the software, and the cloud services are all very tightly integrated. And we'll see how that comes together really through the dashboard demo. So we will definitely walk you through how some of that works. We are the leaders in cloud-managed networking, and in fact, among Cisco's fastest-growing portfolios, there's over 75,000 unique customers that have chosen to deploy the Meraki solution. We'll talk a little bit more specifically about how that has played out in education. And in fact, there are over 1 million Meraki network devices online around the world. You can see some of the logos there below. We'll show you a few more school districts, and of course, later on, just dive in a little bit more deeply into the specific deployment at Reading. Now, I'm sure all of you have had experience with cloud-based tools or cloud-assisted tools, and you might be wondering how the cloud applies to networking and K-12 specifically. We've designed and architected the Meraki solution to really bring those benefits of the cloud to K-12 deployments. And there are a few things that are very important with regards to cloud in IT. And we've kept those definitely front and center as we designed the solution. And here you can see just a few of them. Security, scalability, and reliability. Those are some of the most important aspects of any IT solution, and especially also for networking. And as we talk about some of the aspects and benefits of the cloud and the architecture, these are just some of the things that you might keep in mind as we walk through the demo as well. We've designed the solution so that it is inherently secure. In fact, no user traffic passes through the cloud. And you can see there it's only used for management and configuration data. In fact, for those of you who are interested in a little bit more details about security and certification, we are PCI 3.0 Level 1 certified. And we have third-party security audits, daily vulnerability testing, penetration testing, things like that. And just as importantly, we keep the infrastructure and the system up to date through automatic firmware and security updates. The system is very, very scalable. In fact, you can add devices or sites in just a few minutes. That means if you have a small school or perhaps a library, an entire district with perhaps hundreds of schools and tens of thousands of users and students, then you can scale that up without having to worry about all of the infrastructure that would otherwise be required to scale up a network to that size. And reliability, absolutely essential to the cloud, because when it's supporting something like the network has to be up. and we've designed the cloud with redundancy and high availability built in. In fact, there are multiple data centers distributed around the world, and if for some reason the connection to a data center is interrupted, the network will still continue to work. Policies will still be enforced, Wi-Fi will still be on, passwords will still be enforced, and so on. And we also back up the reliability of that system with a 99.99% uptime SLA. If you do want to find out a little bit more about the architecture, we do have more information on that. There's a link at the bottom of the slide where you can get a little bit more detail around it. We'd be happy to walk you through that a little bit later as well. Now, what specifically is appealing for K-12 environments? There are a few things that really stand out. I think that the most important thing, and what we'll show you here in the demo in just a few minutes, is the intuitive and centralized management. There's no training required. There's no complex system to learn and ramp up on, and you can monitor and manage your Wi-Fi network, switching, security, and even manage devices like iPads, all from one single pane of glass, which we call the Meraki dashboard. It has built into it all of the tools that you would need to operate a K-12 networking environment. It has the visibility into all of your sites and schools, as well as the troubleshooting that you do need to have when something goes wrong or when you want to make a change in the environment to fit a need. And as well as the visibility into the infrastructure and the network, there's also some fantastic tools for visibility into users, devices, and applications. Super, super important when we're talking about a school environment to understand where is the bandwidth going, how are users getting on in the network, and what are they doing once they're on, and of course giving you tools to be able to control that behavior and limit or throttle, or in some cases block entirely things that shouldn't be accessed. Now, we do have thousands of K-12 campuses that have deployed the Meraki solution. You can see some of the names here. Some are smaller independent schools, some are larger school districts, and there are many, many more. In fact, we have many more on our website, and if you do want to dig into one of these school deployments a little bit more, perhaps talk to someone at one of those schools, we'd be happy to set up a reference call for you with someone at one of those schools. But of course, the highlight for today is Reading School District, and specifically we're going to talk about how CR and his team have enabled classroom connectivity across the district. So first I want to say, CR, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today and for taking a little bit of time to share about your experience with the Meraki solution.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pablo.
CR, if you wouldn't mind, we can start off with a little bit of context and background, just sharing a little bit about the school district and the IT team that you have.
Sure. So as Pablo mentioned, I'm from the Reading School District, and it's an urban district, pretty large, right about an hour outside of Philadelphia. So we have around 18,000 students, which makes us the fourth largest district in PA. We also have about 2,000 staff and faculty, and they're all spread across 19 school buildings and 3 admin buildings. Currently, the IT staff is it's pretty small for a district of this size. We have eight people currently with 1 vacancy.
Yeah, that does sound pretty impressive, and we're going to dive into a few of the details of how you actually make that happen. How did you come across Meraki, and maybe even before that, what were you looking to accomplish when you were looking for a new solution?
Sure. So Meraki, I had become familiar with after the Cisco acquisition, actually. And so our old solution, as it says, it was all controller-based. There were well over 20 of them. So I wanted a solution that I, as one person managing the network, could go to one spot, manage everything I needed to. Really a single pane of glass solution, if possible, that's actually a single pane of glass. And that's certainly what we've gotten from Meraki, so in that aspect, it's been great.
Super. And What did that deployment look like? How long did it take, and how did you roll it out?
Sure. So far, we've completed our high school location as well as the 3 admin locations. We did all of those last summer. So as it says, we're at about 130 access points right now. It's a mix of MR32s and 34s. The 32s we use in classrooms and general office areas, and the 34s we put in higher density areas like libraries and auditoriums. So that was a project for last summer. This coming summer, we're going to do new wireless in 11 additional school buildings. We're going to do all MR42s. And last summer, we also added an MX600 and an MS320 switch to become our WAN front end for the district. And we also added an MX64 last summer at one of our off-net locations. So this coming summer, we're also going to add a second MX600 for high availability. And then the summer after, summer of 2017, we'll complete the wireless rollout at the rest of the buildings.
Great, and then you'll have the ability to manage all of that network that you mentioned right from the Meraki dashboard. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, great. Looks like some pretty cool and impressive projects last year, and then these coming next years. Hopefully, you have the air conditioning turned on when you're moving all that gear around.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we find is very interesting to our audience when we're on some of these webinars is specifically how a school district has configured their network. So could you share with us a little bit about what you've done in terms of enabling that management across your whole district, and then some of the specifics around the Wi-Fi?
Sure. Yeah, so the APs, from the deployment aspect, dealing with the large numbers we're going to be dealing with and dealt with last summer. So I specifically use network templates. So now I can go to one spot in the dashboard and change a setting that affects all of the buildings, whereas before I would have to go make the change on upwards of 20 controllers, which took a significant amount of time. The other nice piece when dealing with a large number of APs is the bulk import. So the cool thing is last summer, I was actually able to have everything configured in dashboard, all the APs named and placed on maps, all of that. I have that done when they were even delivered. So the nice thing with that also is that we can have techs install it or other staff install the APs, and they don't actually need my help. They can plug them in and the APs just work. So on the configuration side, as it says, we currently use just 2 SSIDs, and I actually worked pretty hard to make sure that we could stick to just 2 and not go any more than that. So on our main SSID, the RSD Wi-Fi, we're using 802.1x against a Windows Network Policy Server, NPS. And that's enabled through using Radius with AD groups to use group policies in the dashboard, which we can show later. And currently, our guest network is unfortunately just a WPA2 shared key, but we will be switching this summer to the Meraki guest authentication, which we can go over as well. And that'll be really nice because we can actually move the management of guest accounts down to the building offices instead of having to react very quickly when guests, seem to appear out of thin air that no one knew about. So yeah, we can get into a bit more detail in the demo about how the Radius is working with the group policies. But those have worked really well because you get a group policy applied to someone, and then you can go to do all sorts of stuff, such as bandwidth management, traffic shaping, get them in the right VLAN, and all of that.
Yeah, super. And could you share just some examples of the special events that you might support with special guest Wi-Fi?
Sure, yeah. If we have like a public event going on at a certain building where they want to have an open house for one night or something like that, I can really easily turn on an extra SSID, and I can make it happen only at that building, or if we need to, just turn it on for all the buildings really quickly. And then, that way we're not having to share a password for a network that's always going to be around to people. We can just turn it on, click, say, show up, connect to the network, you're good to go. And if we set it to something like NAT mode, the APs themselves can do web filtering with that, and we can throttle the bandwidth so they don't kill the network. And from that aspect, it's really flexible and it makes it really easy to respond very quickly to needs.
Yeah, super. Thank you for sharing that example. Moving a little bit beyond the the Wi-Fi network, you mentioned briefly about the security aspects. Can you talk about what you're doing with that and the wired network?
Sure. So the wired network, as I mentioned last summer, we put in an MX100, and that's now our primary district firewall. We also have an MX64 at a small building that's off our network. We're doing a site-to-site VPN between there. The MX600 has been really easy to manage. You know, it's great as a firewall to very easily make changes to NAT rules or forwarding rules. Doing anything super special in that yet as far as traffic shaping or any categories of that. We probably in our web filter, which most K-12 institutions doing. We also do have a single MS320 switch which is in front of the firewall. And it acts as the gateway to the internet for the MX600 in the district.
Yeah, it sounds like a fairly typical use case for a district firewall, and one big difference here being that you have that ease of management that you mentioned, and also that it's integrated into the same management solution as the rest of your network. So we will be able to see that briefly when we go into the demo. I think we'll spend most of the demo on the Wi-Fi part, but I'll touch on it when it is visible. So one topic that comes up, I think almost every time in conversations with schools is devices, tablets, iPads, and mobile devices. Systems Manager is Meraki's solution for mobile device management, and it's quite flexible, and schools use it for different use cases. Could you share a little bit about the way that you're using it?
Sure. So we primarily use it for our iPad deployment. We deploy iPads across some elementary classrooms and especially in special education. So the biggest change for us is that it's become very easy to manage the iPads, especially the apps. Previously, we had teachers who would buy apps on personal Apple IDs. The IT department didn't manage it. We weren't managing the payments of that. And if the teacher left, the app left with them. So now we use Apple's volume purchase program managed through the Systems Manager interface, which makes it very easy for us to purchase applications, make sure they're being procured through the correct departments, and then assign them to iPads that need them. And the entire Systems Manager setup is actually managed by just one of our technicians, which is great. So he's able to do everything he needs to it. Everyone that has an iPad can submit a help desk request, and it goes to him, and then he can do whatever he needs through Systems Manager. And with the way dashboard's set up, the nice thing is he has access just to Systems Manager, doesn't have access to the other parts of dashboard that he doesn't need, but he's able to get everything he needs done.
Great. And we have a couple questions that are around what you just mentioned around Systems Manager, and then there's another one going back to the MX. So first on Systems Manager, if and when you allow BYOD, are you going to use Systems Manager to onboard devices using ETLS and the Sentry feature of Systems Manager?
So we may for iOS devices, although actually when we get to the demo, we can see that on the MR side, the group policies and the radius setup that I have is actually already ready to go for BYOD, so we can kind of look at that. But the onboarding for Systems Manager, which I have played around with a bit, it's very easy to do, and it's great to have Meraki management, manage all of those certificate pieces, which can be rather annoying on the user side.
Great, thank you. And another question that's going back to the MX, I think the audio was cutting out just a little bit as you mentioned this. I think you mentioned a little bit about this. Are you using the MXs for content filtering?
We do not today, no. We have another content filter. We will do some limited content filter on the APs, but on the MXs today, we do not.
Great, thank you. I think another common case is for districts to get their internet feed, so to speak, pre-filtered by something provided by the state or local government.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to dive into the demo in just a minute. Could you just tell us a little bit of how you would summarize the experience and the results that you've seen with Meraki at your school district?
Yeah, so far all of the deployments we've done across the MX, the MR, they've been very successful, and we're very excited to continue them. We no longer had to say, we don't have to say to people anymore, sorry, you can't do that because the wireless is too old or too slow. So now we can move past worrying about the network not working and actually enable teachers to use the technology in their classrooms that they want to.
Great. Thank you very much, CR, for sharing that. Let's go ahead and dive into the live demo. I'm going to sign in to the Meraki dashboard, and CR has been kind enough to give us permission to show off a few parts of the network. And I guess just to give everyone the context of what we're seeing when we start off and log in, this is an overview of the entire organization. And perhaps I should zoom in a little bit. And there we can see a screenshot similar to what we saw on one of the slides. And you can see on the right side is a summary of the networks that are deployed, including their status, and everything's green. It is a school day, and so everything's up and running. And you can see the usage. Let's sort by usage here. You can see some of the heavily used networks and the different environments that CR has set up. So do you want to walk us through some of these networks, and we can just go from there?
Sure. So I actually thought the first place we could start out is in the RSD wireless template, so we can sort of go over the security configuration there.
Yeah, let's have a look at the configuration templates. So we haven't, in fact, gone into a particular network, and this is leveraging something CR mentioned a little bit back, and that is the ability to have a template, configuration template, we call them, where you can go into the dashboard, make a change in one area, and then a bunch of networks will be updated to reflect that change.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, this in particular has been a huge help to me because actually just last week I had to make a change to an SSID at all of our buildings, and for all of the buildings that are not yet on Meraki, which at this point is still most of them, I had to go into the controller for each site, make the change, save it, log out, go to the next one, and that takes quite a bit of time, whereas on the Meraki side, I went in and within 5 minutes it was done.
Yeah, so should I just go into this first one here?
Yep. So if you want to go to the SSID page, you can start there.
Yeah, so how about the general configuration? Oops, sorry.
Actually, can you go to the SSID config if you switch to the template network?
Yeah, right here.
There we go. So here, as I mentioned, you can see the overview of our two main SSIDs. The RSD public one is a temporary one. So RSD Wi-Fi, again, that's our 802.1x network. And then RSD guest, that's our currently pre-shared key, but we will be switching that to Meraki guest authentication, which I can show because I have a template for that as well. But Pablo, if you go into the access control settings for RSD Wi-Fi, we can look at how that's configured.
Yeah, I'll just scroll down a little bit to give people a view.
Okay. Yeah, if you actually want to keep going down. So you'll see we're using on this one 802.1x with custom radius. So both of those servers listed are Windows servers running the network policy servers. And we do, as I mentioned, group policy assignments from radius. So we're using that filter ID attribute. So on the NPS server, I have 6 total policies. Each has a unique filter ID to tell the Meraki side what group policy to apply. And those policies are tied to Active Directory groups with users or computers in them. So we can very easily separate student computers, staff computers, and then we do have setups for BYOD, even though we're not yet offering that.
Great. Do you want to go into some of those group policies so we can show those?
Yeah, sure. If you want to go to group policies page quick. So you'll see the 5 main ones here. So our main ones, student, staff, those are specifically used for computers. On the 802.1x side, we're doing ETLS with computer certificates. And you'll see, so right now, really what I'm doing is getting the VLAN assignment through group policies. On the main networks, we're not doing any bandwidth throttling or anything else. But you'll see on the BYOD networks, we're putting those into different VLANs and then doing bandwidth throttling. So primarily for us, the VLAN assignment helps us with ACLs on the switch side and for our filter to make sure that the appropriate filter policy is applied. I did mention that I have 6 total policies on the NPS server. I have sort of a fail-safe that does not actually assign a filter ID. So a group policy is not assigned in Meraki, but you get put into the student VLAN, which if we go back to the access control config, we'll see that the default VLAN is set to the student one. So if for any reason the group policy doesn't apply correctly, you get to put in 510, which is the student.
Yeah, great. Sounds pretty clever too.
Yeah, that's worked really well. And I should say, as far as I've noticed, we never have an issue where the group policy fails to apply. That works really well. Yeah, so we're not really doing anything else here. You can see we're not assigning the VLANs through Radius, although if you wanted to do that instead of group policies, very easy to do right here.
Yep.
Pablo, can you switch to the template that's called, it has new in the name?
Sure can.
Okay, and then if you can go to the access control settings again. And so if we look at RST guest under here. Oh, sorry, can you get to the template that's labeled new?
Yeah, I think I somehow got to the wrong one.
Yeah.
And then this test network?
Yeah, and then if you can get to the access control thing. Okay, so this is showing how we're going to do guest authentication after the summer, hopefully. So instead of doing a pre-shared key, which, as I'm sure everyone realizes, is not great, especially in a K-12 environment where kids like to figure that information out, we're going to switch to the Meraki authentication. So Meraki will host the authentication for us, and we'll be able to have the building offices manage all of the account creation for us, so we don't have to do that anymore. And then, they can create the account with an email address and password of whoever the guest is, and then they'll be able to authenticate on their own device. And the cool thing is, Pablo, if you can scroll down just a bit, with this, we have it configured so you can see the captive portal strength. Everything's blocked until they sign in, so they can't, partially authenticate and then go do whatever they wanted anyway. We also can limit it to 1 device at a time, which is awesome for us. And if you go down a little more to the addressing and traffic section, so for this network, we're actually going to use the NAT mode on Meraki APs, which is really nice because this is now, it's another DHCP scope, more ACLs, all that I don't have to configure at every building. So the APs will actually take care of IP address assignment. All the clients, they're separated from each other automatically. It's very easy to say that they have no access to the LAN, which we're doing. And you can also see at the bottom there, we do the content filtering on the AP. So the one thing I will note with the NAT setup is in a traditional like K-12 environment where you have a separate content filter, all of the user traffic when in NAT mode will actually come from the AP management IP address. So you have to be careful that you don't start filtering too much traffic coming from the APs so you don't block the Meraki cloud control traffic.
Yep, that's a pro tip right there. There's a question that came in just around kind of your experience in getting this deployment up and running. You mentioned earlier that you have been managing and still are managing a controller-based solution, and so you, of course, have that successfully up and running, even perhaps if it's not exactly in the way that you'd like your workflow to be. What's been the learning curve with regards to this deployment and solution?
The learning curve is very low with Meraki. I'll say everything is pretty darn obvious in dashboard. And anything where you might need a little more info, there's the little helpful gray, the little info box or the little info circle next to things, which is usually helpful to point you in the right direction if you need anything. I'll also say that the Meraki documentation in general is very good, and there are typically very helpful examples. And on some of them, there's even step-by-step. There are many documents on 802.1x with making Meraki work with a Windows NPS server, which were very helpful. So in general, it's not been a big deal, and working with support too, the engineers have always been great. So it's not been hard to figure anything out if I got stuck.
Super, thank you.
Paolo, do you want to go to the radio settings in the template?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So we'll do wireless radio settings.
So another nice thing here is that the dashboard and the APs will actually manage their channels and their transmit power all on their own. We haven't had any issues with the dashboard being wrong on that front. I haven't had to manually set transmit power or channels anywhere. The APs have done a great job of that, which is really nice, especially because a lot of our schools are in environments that are very close to residences where there's just a ton of traffic. So they've done a great job of making sure that it works inside the building, and we're not trying to provide wireless, outside of the building.
Yeah, and I will mention that for those of you who do have the need to manually change some of those settings, you can change the power output, also radio channel selection. This is the template, however, so it's not shown here because it doesn't make sense to, say, apply the same channel to all of the APs in a particular network.
Sure. So, Pablo, do you want to go to the map and floor plans? You can go to the HS network for that. And if you want to switch the floor plan to any of the floors, really, we can see a map in there. So this is a piece that I think Meraki does particularly well, especially compared to some other wireless solutions that we evaluated before going with Meraki. It's incredibly easy to get a plan in here, whether it's just an image or a PDF document. You can upload them right in the dashboard here, and then you can just drag APs to exactly where they are. And if you're on this page, you get the whole overview, or if you're on an individual AP page, once it's been placed, it actually changes it so you can see where it is right from there. So this has worked really well. It's great for us to go to the, you just look at the whole map and then see wherever you are in the building, what APs are there.
Yeah, and you can see here not only the placement and their location with regards to the floor plan, but also their status. So if somebody is complaining about issues in a particular room, you can just go to this page and see, oh, this AP is online, or maybe it isn't.
Right, absolutely, and that's been really helpful when we've had issues in certain areas. Just to go see what AP is around, are they behaving, or is it perhaps an area that we need to add something? Pablo, can you go to the client overview page for this network? So this page, I was actually asking a colleague of mine this morning what his favorite page in Dashboard was, and he said this page is very useful, and I would agree. This is a great spot, especially compared to our older controller-based solution, which essentially had no visibility into the network. From here, you can see pretty much everything going on. You know, we can see the throughput over the top. We can see the individual application breakdown of what people are using. And then at the bottom with the actual client status, it's really easy, depending on the columns you have shown here. You can make sure the correct 802.1x policies are being applied. You can make sure they're on the right SSID. You know, you can see the OS fingerprinting works really well. And if you click on a specific client, you know, we can drill down and see exactly what that person's doing. So if someone's complaining and saying, you know, it's really slow in my room, I can go very easily and see what the signal is. So we can see this one, really great signal, shouldn't have any issues. When you're doing 802.1x, you see right there what the login is. You also see on the map, as Pablo showing, you know, right where they are. So this status page, you know, you get a ton of info, which I think Meraki at this point is pretty well known for, and definitely really great compared to the other solutions we looked at.
Yeah, here you can see the .1x policy applied to this particular device, in this case staff, or if you want to override it, you can just click in here.
Yeah, so all of it, I mean, it's pretty handy, and this is sort of, you know, a theme for Dashboard in general. When you get into the individual pages of anything, whether you're managing a client or a device, everything you need is right there. So it's really nice. You don't have to go running around, you know, the interface to look for things, and you're always in Dashboard. There isn't, you know, some other application you have to go use.
Yeah, so somebody asked a little bit about the density, the number of machines. I'm not sure if that means APs or things like tablets, but can you describe a little bit about the density? We can go back here to the clients page as well.
Yeah, so you'll see, yeah, if you switch for the last week, so we have quite a few devices at the high school, although of course this is also only counting wireless devices. So right now in the high school, we have APs are placed in every other room. This summer we'll be changing that so they're in every room. The idea for us with an AP in every room is that, you know, if a teacher has a laptop card in their room and the person next door does too, you know, you don't have a ton of clients on one AP. It's spread out pretty well. And I think this building in particular, it's a pretty old building, one that was built with a ton of brick that's incredibly thick. Which no matter the vendor, wireless doesn't love. So we've had pretty good luck with that. The coverage has been decent with that. And I think, you know, the APs, even ones where we have, you know, just a single one in a room and we may have upwards, you know, of 30 or 40 clients, we haven't had any issues. No one, you know, with real complaints there. It works pretty well.
Great, thanks for expanding on that. And then I'll just also note that if you do want to look at, for example, only the guest or only the internal network, it's pretty easy just to click on this drop down and show, let's just see the guest network, 159 clients on the guest network.
Right, yeah, and that's awesome. So, you know, we can go do that. And I think in particular, you'll see the traffic, sort of the destinations between the networks are pretty different. A lot of people on guest are perhaps using personal devices, so you'll usually see something like Facebook is pretty high. Whereas if you look on like the production network, something that would be really high would be like our Windows Update server. Pablo, do you want to go to the client summary page for the RSD WAN network, which is the MX600 network?
Yep. Do you mean the summary?
Yeah. Yep. This page right here. So this is actually sort of along the same lines as, you know, there's a client overview, but also the summary report for the MX network is awesome to see. A really nice overview of what's going on across the district in terms of network traffic. So unfortunately for us in our network setup, we have layer 3 devices in between the MX and the clients. So the top clients by use, you know, you're just seeing IP address because it can't have layer 2 connectivity to them. So I think for many people, if they actually have a different setup where the MX can have layer 2, you get even more info on this page. But even for this, incredibly useful. You can see our average throughput. We sort of hit between 300 and 400 megs every day average. And you can see the total client count. So on an average day, we have about 8,500. Daily average, 6,500. And then we've hit, almost 8,500 unique. So definitely a lot of devices on the network.
Yeah, pretty intense usage. So what kind of WAN link do you have?
So currently we have 1 gig, and next summer we'll be moving to 2 1 gig links, one for each of the firewalls.
Very nice.
Pablo, if you want to go to the VPN status in the network. So as I mentioned before, we do site-to-site VPN between the MX600 and the MX64. I don't know why it's saying disconnected right now, because it's definitely connected. So that works really well for us. This feature in general was incredibly easy to configure. It's just a couple minutes, and the devices were talking. We also do site-to-site VPN with a non-Meraki peer. So we're doing it from the MX to a Cisco ASA. And even that configuration was incredibly easy for both sides, particularly my side, because I didn't have to do almost anything, but the ASA side was easy as well.
Yeah, there are some online documents which have a configuration example file for ASA and a few other non-Meraki VPN peers. Of course, you could just copy as a starting point anyway for a particular configuration.
Right, and actually I should add, when we set up this non-Meraki peer, I actually just sent the network engineer on that side a link to the Meraki documentation and said, I think you can follow this for the ASA, and that's what he followed, and it worked perfectly.
Great.
So Pablo, are there any other questions?
Yeah, let's just take a moment then to pause and review if there are any outstanding questions. So there's one that came in just a moment ago about the Wi-Fi and overlap of, I think, coverage. So the two-part question is, did you have any problems with overlap? And if so, how did you adjust this? Or did you just leave it in the auto setting?
Yeah, so we're leaving it in the auto setting. Dashboard and the APs have been very good about making sure the overlap isn't bad. So the overlap we have at this point, is just fine so that you can roam seamlessly between APs, but the APs aren't killing each other. So yeah, Dashboard has done really well for that. But as Pablo mentioned, you can certainly make manual adjustments if you find an area where Dashboard isn't, accounting for that well.
Thank you. There's a question around content filtering. I'll just take this one. And the question is, are you able to block more than one category? So what CR mentioned, or what CR showed, was the adult category content filtering that's available directly on the Meraki APs. But he does use a separate content filtering solution. And similarly, with the Meraki solution, you can use the MX security appliance to block, I think, on the order of 100 categories or so. So it does have a complete content filtering solution. But what's on the AP is just the adult filtering. And there's a question, can you show a map of coverage and overlap from radio settings? So yes, we can. Maybe if we go back to the HS network.
Yeah, the high school would be good to show.
And
I think it's under radio settings.
Radio settings, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this is a summary of all the channelization and power settings, and there we have the map showing coverage circles.
So the one thing I'll note, and as I briefly mentioned with this building in particular, so these coverage circles are, I would say, quite a bit larger than they perhaps are in reality. All of these rooms have very thick brick walls, so while it appears here that one AP is perhaps serving 3 rooms down from it, it's definitely not. So even though this perhaps looks like there's a ton of overlap, we really have not had an issue with that. The APs have adjusted well, and we don't have issues with that.
Great, thank you. And there are a couple of just general compliments and tips that came in, so thank you for those. And I'm just reviewing to see if there's any others that we want to share. There have been a few people who've asked if the session is being recorded and if we'll send out a link. Yes, a few people unfortunately are late or just would like to share it with some of their colleagues, so we are recording the session and we'll share it with you after the event. Okay, CR, thank you very much for walking us through this demo and going through the organization, the templates, the specific security configurations and Wi-Fi configurations, as well as the security appliance. We really appreciate you sharing all of this with everyone today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, guys.
So before we wrap up, I just want to quickly go through an overview of the Meraki product families. And we've been focused mostly on the Wi-Fi solution. We do have indoor and outdoor wireless access points, both 802.11n and 802.11ac. We also touched on the security appliances, and CR mentioned a few models. Basically, they are functionally equivalent. You can see that they range from smaller models to serve smaller sites and larger models to serve larger sites. And of course, their capacity, throughput, performance, and so on scale accordingly. We also have a line of Ethernet switches, layer 2, layer 3, and fiber aggregation switches as well. And they do support physical stacking as well as something we call virtual stacking, which essentially is the ability to manage your entire fleet of deployed switches through the same Meraki dashboard. And we also touched on Systems Manager, our MDM solution, which in school environments is very commonly used to manage iPads. And in the case of Reading School District, they're using Systems Manager to manage content and applications on those iPads. And that is a very, very common use case. For those users that also deploy Meraki network infrastructure, they can also tie Systems Manager into the network and security for their devices for iPads. So for example, they can use the profile of a device to dynamically adjust the security policies applied to that device depending on its security posture. If you do want to get your hands on one of these parts of the solution, or perhaps all of it that we've talked about today, we do have a very simple evaluation and trial program where we can send you some gear that you can evaluate on your site. You can connect it to your AD server, for example, and see how it works with your existing tools and infrastructure. If you need any technical support to get that up and running, we're happy to lend you a hand there. And then you can see if it's the right fit for you. If it is, you can simply purchase it. If it's not, you can simply send it back to us. We do have a pretty easy to understand and all-inclusive and simplified licensing and pricing model. And all of the solution includes 24/7 technical support by phone and by email, ongoing feature upgrades, maintenance, and all of the indoor products have a lifetime warranty. The outdoor access points have a 1-year warranty. So if you are interested in trying out some of the Meraki solution, just go to that link at the bottom of the page or talk to your Meraki representative, and he or she will be happy to set that up for you. Okay, at this point, we're going to leave just a minute or two for any outstanding questions, and I'm going to pull the questions up to see if there are any that just came in. If there's anything that's on mind, please go ahead and enter it now. There are a couple questions on the switches that I mentioned. One, do the switches work with Cisco VoIP? Yes, they absolutely do. We do find it's pretty common for our switch customers to deploy those switches with Cisco VoIP solutions. And are the switches managed? So yes, they are managed, and they're managed entirely from the Meraki dashboard. It's the same dashboard and UI that we walked through during the demo. A couple of people have been saying thank you to CR for the demo and the presentation, so thanks again. And a question about Systems Manager. There have been a couple of questions around the licensing of Systems Manager and how it works with the network infrastructure. So you don't need Meraki network infrastructure to use Systems Manager. If you have it, you can take advantage of some. If you have the network infrastructure, you can take advantage of some additional benefits, but it's absolutely not a requirement. Systems Manager is managed entirely through the dashboard, and so there's no hardware component whatsoever. And all you need to do is enroll your devices into the system. And you can sign up for Systems Manager online if you go to meraki.cisco.com and just look under the products page for Systems Manager. And then you can fill out a short form. It'll create a Meraki account for you, and you can get up and running in just about 2 minutes and start enrolling your devices. Another question around switches. Do the switches do port security? So yes, they do. They have a variety of port security features like .1x, MAC auth, sticky MAC auth, things like that. A clarifying question around the management. Are you able to console into the device for configuration, or is it strictly through the web-based dashboard? It is strictly through the web-based dashboard. There is a very, very minimal set of configuration ability that you can do locally on a switch and other Meraki devices, and that's to set things like management VLANs, static IP addresses, if you do need to do those things. And a question around the recording and where specifically will the recording be made available. And we'll make it available in 2 places. One is on our website, meraki.com/webinars, and another is on our YouTube page. So if you just Google for YouTube Meraki, you'll find quite a few recordings and videos, some on webinars like this one and some on products or technology that you might be interested in. So I definitely encourage you to check that out also. Okay, we're just about at the end of our questions and almost at the top of the hour, so I want to say thanks again, CR, for sharing about your experience with Meraki and for taking the time to be with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you guys again.
And thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us, and we look forward to working with you soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.